Let me tell you about a book that has done something genuinely rare in the world of psychology writing. It has made hardened therapists cry on their lunch breaks. It has sent skeptics, people who swore therapy was not for them, directly to their phones to find a therapist. It has given people in the middle of their own sessions a language for things they had been trying to articulate for months. And it has done all of this while being, by most accounts, one of the most compulsively readable books in recent memory. The book is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Gottlieb. Published in 2019, it became an immediate bestseller, has been translated into dozens of languages, and is in active development as a television series. And none of that is the most interesting thing about it. The most interesting thing about it is what it does. Which is to take you, simultaneously, through parallel narratives woven together with novelistic precision, inside the lives of 4 of Gottlieb's therapy clients and inside her own experience of going to therapy herself. It collapses the wall between therapist and patient in a way that is startling and generous and completely unlike anything else in the genre. Today we are going through the key ideas in this book, the frameworks, the psychological concepts, the human insights that make it not just a great read but a genuinely important contribution to how we understand therapy, change, and the experience of being alive. A cheat sheet covering everything in this video is linked in the description. Let's begin. Section 1. Who is Gottlieb? Gottlieb is a psychotherapist and contributing editor at The Atlantic, which already tells you something about the particular quality of intelligence she brings to both her clinical work and her writing, the ability to hold the interior, human, emotionally complex dimensions of experience alongside rigorous analytical thinking. But her path to becoming a therapist was not direct. She has a degree from Stanford, trained at UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine, worked as a television writer and producer, and wrote a widely read and widely debated Atlantic essay and subsequent book called Marry Him, which explored the psychology of romantic decision-making with the same combination of personal candor and intellectual seriousness that characterizes all of her best work. She came to clinical psychology as a second career, which is, as it turns out, exactly the kind of origin story that produces the most interesting kind of therapist. Someone who brings to the clinical room not just training but genuine lived experience of the world, of multiple careers, of the particular uncertainty of building a life while not being entirely sure what you're building. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone began, as the best books often do, from a personal crisis. Gottlieb's long-term partner ended their relationship suddenly, and she, a therapist who had spent years helping other people navigate exactly this kind of rupture, found herself completely undone by it. She found a therapist of her own. And the book is, at its heart, the story of what happened next, in her sessions with her therapist, and in the sessions of 4 clients whose stories she weaves alongside her own. The result is something genuinely unusual. A book about therapy that is written from inside the room, from both chairs. Section 2. The central premise. Therapists are human too. If there is a single most important idea in Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, the one that runs underneath everything else and gives the book its unusual power, it is this: therapists are not a separate category of human being. They are not people who have resolved their difficulties, transcended their emotional complexity, or achieved some elevated vantage point from which they can calmly observe the human condition without being in it. They are people. Fully, messily, vulnerably people. People who cry in their cars, who get blindsided by relationships ending, who carry their own histories and blind spots and unfinished business into the consulting room every single day. The therapist who is most present to a client's pain is not the one who has escaped pain. It is the one who has met their own pain honestly enough to sit with someone else's without needing to make it stop. Gottlieb makes this not as an abstract argument but as a lived demonstration. We watch her, a credentialed, experienced clinician who has helped hundreds of people navigate exactly the kind of loss she is experiencing, completely fall apart. We watch her go to her own therapist, Wendell, and we watch her resist the work, avoid the real material, perform insight rather than having it, and slowly, painfully, arrive at something true. This is radical transparency in the service of destigmatization. Because one of the most persistent myths about therapy is that it is for people who cannot cope, for people who are, in some fundamental sense, less than those who do not need it. Gottlieb demolishes this myth not by arguing against it but by showing us, in intimate detail, that the person who needed therapy most urgently in the book is the therapist herself. And the corollary insight, the one that every person who has ever hesitated to enter therapy needs to hear, is that going to therapy is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that you are paying attention. That you take your own inner life seriously enough to invest in it. That you understand, at some level, that the unexamined life is not only philosophically impoverished, but practically limiting, that the patterns you cannot see are running your choices in ways you cannot change until you see them. Section 3. The Four Ultimate Concerns, one of the most intellectually significant frameworks in Maybe You Should Talk To. Someone comes not from Gottlieb directly but from the existential psychiatrist Irvin Yalom, whose work she draws on extensively and who is, in many ways, the philosophical spine of the book. Yalom proposed that beneath the presenting concerns people bring to therapy, the relationship problems, the career anxiety, the depression, the specific events that prompted them to make the call, there are four fundamental existential concerns that underlie almost all human suffering. He called these the ultimate concerns. And understanding them changes the way you see not just therapy but your own interior life. The first is death, the awareness of our own mortality and the anxiety that this awareness produces. Yalom argues that death anxiety is one of the most pervasive and least examined forces in human psychology. We organize enormous portions of our lives, our pursuit of legacy, our terror of insignificance, our relationship to time and urgency, around the fact of our finitude, most of it unconsciously. One of therapy's most important functions, in Yalom's framework, is bringing this awareness into conscious relationship, so that it can be worked with rather than merely defended against. The second ultimate concern is freedom, which in Yalom's existential framework does not mean freedom from constraint but rather the terrifying fact of radical responsibility. We are free to author our own lives. We cannot ultimately blame our choices on anyone else. And this freedom, rather than being purely liberating, is for most people at least partly experienced as an abyss, the vertiginous recognition that there is no predetermined script, no guaranteed right answer, no authority figure who will tell us with certainty what to do. Existential anxiety about freedom is why people stay in situations that are clearly not working, why they hand their choices to other people, why they fill the open space of possibility with busyness and noise. The third ultimate concern is isolation, the irreducible aloneness of consciousness. No matter how deeply connected we are to other people, our subjective experience is fundamentally our own. We cannot fully transmit it, and no one can fully receive it. This is not loneliness in the ordinary sense, it is the more fundamental recognition that each of us is, at the level of experience, alone in a way that no relationship can completely resolve. And yet, as Yalom and Gottlieb both argue, it is precisely in relationship, in the genuine encounter between two people who are each alone, that something essential can happen. The isolation doesn't dissolve. But it becomes bearable. And sometimes, in the right relationship, it becomes something close to beautiful. The fourth ultimate concern is meaninglessness, the recognition that the universe does not arrive pre-equipped with a meaning that tells us what our lives are for. Meaning is not found. It is made. And the making of it, the construction of a life that feels oriented towards something genuinely worth orienting toward, is one of the central projects of a human life and one of the central tasks of psychotherapy at its deepest level. Gottlieb weaves all four of these concerns through the stories of her clients. John, the brash Hollywood producer who is furious at everyone around him, is organizing his entire defensive structure around the terror of death. Julie, the young newlywed facing a terminal diagnosis at 34, is confronting mortality directly and finding, in the confrontation, a kind of clarity about what actually matters. Rita, the 69-year-old who wants to find love before she dies, is negotiating isolation and meaning simultaneously. And Gottlieb herself, in her work with Wendell, is being asked to reckon with freedom, with the ways she has been choosing, and the ways those choices have been authored by something other than her truest self. Section 4. The presenting problem versus the real problem. One of the most practically useful, and most humbling, insights in Maybe You Should Talk to Someone is Gottlieb's articulation of the gap between what people say they want from therapy and what they actually need. The presenting problem is what brings someone through the door. The relationship that ended. The panic attacks. The job that has become unbearable. The grief that won't lift. These are real, and they deserve to be taken seriously, and skilled therapists take them seriously. But the presenting problem is almost never the whole story. It is, more often, the doorway. The thing specific enough and urgent enough to overcome the resistance to asking for help, which is itself a meaningful thing, worth examining. And what lives behind the door, what the presenting problem is an expression of, what pattern it is the latest iteration of, what older wound it has reopened, is usually where the real work is. John enters therapy furious about his girlfriend and determined to get Gottlieb to confirm that everyone around him is the problem. It takes many sessions, and considerable therapeutic skill, before the real material begins to emerge, a grief so enormous and so defended against that his entire personality has organized itself around not feeling it. The presenting problem is the relationship. The real problem is the loss he has never let himself mourn. This dynamic, the gap between the stated complaint and the underlying material, is one of the reasons therapy can feel, particularly in the early phases, like it is not addressing what you came for. The experienced clinician is often tracking multiple levels simultaneously: what the client is saying, what the pattern beneath the saying is, and what the therapeutic relationship itself is revealing about how the client moves through the world. This is not evasion. It is depth. And Gottlieb describes it with unusual clarity, from both the clinician's chair and the patient's. Section 5. Change, why we want it and why we resist it. Perhaps the insight in Maybe You Should Talk to Someone that lands most universally, the one that readers and clinicians alike describe as the most clarifying, is Gottlieb's exploration of the paradox of change. People come to therapy because they want something to be different. They are suffering, and they want the suffering to stop. They are stuck, and they want to get unstuck. They are exhausted by a pattern they keep repeating, and they want to stop repeating it. The desire for change is real and urgent and, in most cases, entirely genuine. And then, often within sessions, sometimes within the same breath, they demonstrate with equal clarity why the change cannot happen. They present the situation as fixed and themselves as helpless within it. They identify the solution and then explain why the solution is not available to them. They make progress and then, with an almost architectural precision, find a way to return to exactly where they started. This is not stupidity. It is not weakness. It is what psychodynamic therapists call resistance, and what Gottlieb, with characteristic honesty, examines in her own experience as fully as in her clients'. Resistance is not the opposite of the desire for change. It is the other side of it. We resist change because change, even change that we desperately want, requires the loss of something familiar. The familiar story about ourselves. The familiar role in our relationships. The familiar, if painful, explanation for why things are the way they are. Gottlieb quotes a principle that has become one of the most shared lines from the book. People come to therapy wanting to change, and discover that what they really want is to feel understood exactly as they are. And the work of therapy is holding both, the understanding and the gentle, persistent invitation towards something different. She also articulates something that every person who has ever done real therapeutic work will recognize: change doesn't happen in the dramatic breakthrough moments, as satisfying as those can be. It happens in the accumulation of small, often unremarkable moments of choosing slightly differently. Of catching the old pattern a half-second earlier than usual. Of being honest about something you would previously have left unsaid. The revolution of therapy is almost always quiet, and almost always slower than anyone wanted. And yet, it happens. That is the other thing the book insists on, with evidence drawn from 4 lives, including Gottlieb's own. Change is possible. Not the dramatic, sudden, once and for all kind that people fantasize about. The real kind. The kind that shows up in how you move through ordinary Tuesday mornings, in how you speak to yourself when something goes wrong, in what you are willing to ask for and what you are willing to let go of. The real kind is slower, quieter, and in the end, more durable than the fantasy. Section 6. What the book reveals about the therapeutic relationship. If there is one thing maybe you should talk to someone demonstrates that no clinical training manual fully captures, it is the nature and the power of the therapeutic relationship itself. The research on what makes therapy effective is actually quite clear on this point. Across modalities, across presenting concerns, across populations, the single most consistent predictor of positive therapeutic outcome is the quality of the therapeutic alliance, the relationship between therapist and client. Not the specific technique. Not the theoretical orientation. The relationship. Gottlieb shows us why. In her sessions with Wendell, she shows us what it feels like to be genuinely seen by another person who is not invested in you being a particular way, who has no stake in your being okay, no role in the relationships you are describing, no history with you that creates an obligation to protect. The therapist's separateness, their outsideness to your life, is not a limitation of the relationship. It is one of its most valuable features. She also shows us, in the sessions with her clients, the extraordinary, often invisible labor of being the person who holds the space. The work of not flinching. The work of sitting with someone's pain without trying to fix it, which requires having developed enough tolerance for your own pain that you do not need to escape theirs. The work of being a consistent, reliable, warm presence across weeks and months and years, through all the ways a client tests that consistency, consciously and not. And she shows us something about the mutuality of the relationship that is almost never discussed publicly, that therapists are changed by their clients too. That the people who sit across from them, with their specific stories and their specific courage and their specific ways of being in the world, leave something in the room. That Gottlieb's clients, John and Julie and Rita and the others, are not merely recipients of her expertise. They are, in ways that are real and lasting, her teachers. This is the book's most generous and most important gift, the argument, made through story rather than through argument, that the therapeutic relationship is not a service transaction. It is a genuine human encounter. And genuine human encounters, even those bounded by time and fee and ethical framework, can be among the most transformative experiences available to us. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone is not a book that tells you what to do with your life. It does not offer a framework for optimal living or a system for managing your emotions or a protocol for getting from where you are to where you want to be. What it offers is rarer and, ultimately, more useful. An honest, luminous, deeply compassionate account of what it actually looks like to be human, to be stuck, to resist, to grieve, to slowly and imperfectly change, to discover in the presence of another person something about yourself that you could not have found alone. Laurie Gottlieb wrote a book about therapy that reads like a novel, argues like a scholar, and lands like a conversation with a brilliant friend who happens to know more about your psychology than anyone has ever told you. That combination, the narrative grip, the intellectual rigor, the warmth, is extraordinarily rare. And it is why this book has found its way to so many people who needed exactly what it had to give. If you haven't read it, read it. If you have, I hope this video gave you a richer framework for what you took in. The cheat sheet is in the description, Gottlieb's key frameworks, the 4 ultimate concerns, the insights on change and resistance, and the core themes of the book, all in one organized reference. For your own shelf and for your clinical practice. Share this video with someone who is on the fence about therapy, someone who loved the book, or someone who needs to hear that going to therapy is not a sign of weakness but one of the most honest and courageous things a person can do. I'll see you in the next one.